Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a young girl named Cinderella. She was born to loving parents, but tragedy struck their family when her mother fell ill and passed away. Cinderella's father, grief-stricken, decided to remarry, hoping that a new wife would bring happiness back into their lives. However, the woman he chose was not the kind and loving stepmother Cinderella had hoped for. Her new stepmother had two daughters of her own, Anastasia and Drizella. They were spoiled, selfish, and unkind. They treated Cinderella like a servant, forcing her to do all the chores while they lazed around the house. Cinderella's life became a never-ending cycle of cleaning, cooking, and taking care of her stepsister's every whim. Despite her harsh circumstances, Cinderella remained kind and gentle. She found solace in the company of the animals that lived in the house. Birds would sing to her, and mice would gather around her, helping with her chores whenever they could. She even had a special bond with a kind old cat named Whiskers. One day, an invitation arrived at their doorstep. The royal palace was hosting a grand ball to celebrate the prince's upcoming birthday, and every eligible maiden in the kingdom was invited. Cinderella's stepsisters were overjoyed at the prospect of attending the ball and set about preparing their outfits immediately. They called upon Cinderella to help them with their dresses, sewing, and hairstyling.
Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived a beautiful young girl named Cinderella. She was known throughout the land for her grace and kindness, but she led a life filled with hardship. Cinderella's mother had passed away when she was just a child, leaving her in the care of her wicked stepmother and two stepsisters, Anastasia and Drizella. Cinderella's days were spent doing endless chores, from scrubbing the floors to washing the dishes and tending to the gardens. Her stepmother and stepsisters treated her cruelly, constantly berating her and assigning more and more work. Yet, despite the cruelty she endured, Cinderella remained gentle and kind, holding on to a belief in the goodness of the world. One sunny morning, as Cinderella was tending to the garden, she noticed a beautiful butterfly fluttering near her. It was unlike any butterfly she had ever seen, with wings that glistened like the morning dew. Entranced by its beauty, she extended her hand, and to her amazement, the butterfly landed gently on her finger. As she marveled at this magical moment, the butterfly transformed into a shimmering fairy. "I am your fairy godmother," the enchanting creature announced. "I have been watching over you, Cinderella, and I have come to grant you a wish." "Tell me, what is your dearest wish?" Cinderella's eyes welled up with tears of gratitude. She had often wished for a chance to attend the royal ball that was to be held at the palace. "Oh, dear fairy godmother," she said, her voice trembling with hope, "my greatest wish is to go to the royal ball tonight and meet the prince." The fairy godmother smiled warmly at Cinderella's heartfelt wish. "Your wish shall be granted, my dear. But first, we must transform you into the most beautiful princess the kingdom has ever seen." With a wave of her magic wand, Cinderella's ragged clothes transformed into a breathtaking ball gown made of the finest silk and adorned with sparkling jewels. Her hair was styled into an intricate updo, and on her feet appeared a pair of delicate glass slippers. Cinderella gazed down at herself in awe, hardly recognizing the vision of loveliness before her. "Thank you, fairy godmother," she whispered, but the fairy godmother wasn't finished yet. She turned her attention to a nearby pumpkin and, with a wave of her wand, transformed it into a magnificent carriage, complete with white horses to pull it. "Now, my dear, you shall go to the ball," she declared. Before Cinderella could step into the carriage, the fairy godmother offered a word of caution. "You must remember, my magic will only last until midnight. At the stroke of 12, everything will return to its original form. You must leave the palace before then or risk being discovered." Cinderella nodded, her heart filled with both excitement and trepidation. She stepped into the carriage and was whisked away to the royal palace, where the grand ball was in full swing. Inside the palace, the prince, whose name was Prince Charming, stood by the grand staircase, greeting guests and searching for a potential bride. He had grown weary of the endless parade of noblewomen who only sought his title and wealth, and he longed for someone who would love him for who he truly was. As Cinderella entered the palace, there was a collective gasp from the guests. She was a vision of unparalleled beauty, and all eyes turned to her. Prince Charming was captivated by her grace and radiance.
As the days passed, Cinderella watched with a heavy heart as her stepsisters and stepmother prepared for the ball. They were cruel to her, teasing her with tales of the wonderful time they would have at the palace while she stayed behind. But Cinderella remained hopeful. She dreamed that one day her life would change for the better. On the night of the ball, Cinderella's stepsisters and stepmother left her alone in the house. Cinderella watched them go, her heart aching with longing to join them. She couldn't help but cry, and as her tears fell to the ground, a magical transformation began. Her torn and tattered dress turned into a shimmering gown of the finest silk, and her worn-out shoes became delicate glass slippers. Cinderella was stunned by the sudden change, but she knew she had to seize this opportunity. With the help of her friends, the mice and birds, she quickly dressed and made her way to the palace. However, her joy was short-lived as she realized she had no means of transportation. Just when she was about to give up hope, her faithful cat, Whiskers, appeared with a magical pumpkin. With a wave of his paw, the pumpkin transformed into a magnificent carriage, complete with white horses. Cinderella thanked her friends and set off for the palace, feeling like a true princess for the first time in her life. When she arrived at the palace, the prince himself was at the door to welcome her. He was captivated by her beauty and grace, and he couldn't take his eyes off her. Cinderella, in turn, was charmed by the prince's kindness and gentleness. They danced the night away, and for a brief moment, Cinderella forgot all her troubles. Cinderella forgave her stepmother and stepsisters for their past cruelty, and they were genuinely sorry for their actions. Cinderella and the prince were married in a grand ceremony, and they lived happily ever after. Cinderella's story serves as a reminder that kindness, courage, and hope can lead to a happily ever after, even in the face of adversity. She proved that true beauty comes from within, and that a good heart can make dreams come true. And so, in a land far, far away, Cinderella became not just a princess but a symbol of love, resilience, and the power of believing in oneself.
As she descended the staircase, Cinderella's entrance caused quite a stir among the guests, including her stepmother and stepsisters, who failed to recognize her in her newfound splendor. They watched in envy as the prince approached Cinderella and asked her to dance. Throughout the evening, Cinderella and Prince Charming danced together, their hearts growing fonder with each passing moment. They talked and laughed, and for the first time in a long time, Cinderella felt truly happy. She had never imagined that she would find such a connection with the prince. Meanwhile, the clock continued to tick, and Cinderella was acutely aware of the passing time. She stole glances at the clock on the wall, anxiety gnawing at her. The hour grew late, and as the clock struck 11, Cinderella realized she needed to leave before the magic wore off. She excused herself from the prince, who was reluctant to let her go. "I must go," Cinderella said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for this wonderful evening, but I cannot stay any longer." Prince Charming was puzzled but understanding. "Can I at least know your name, fair lady?" Cinderella hesitated, knowing that revealing her true identity would only complicate matters. "My name is Cinderella," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, before she turned and rushed from the palace. As Cinderella fled down the grand staircase and out into the palace gardens, the clock continued to chime, and her beautiful gown began to fade back into rags. Her carriage turned back into a pumpkin, and the horses into mice. Tears streamed down her face as she ran, one glass slipper falling from her foot and left behind on the palace steps. Back at the palace, Prince Charming held Cinderella's glass slipper in his hand, determination burning in his eyes. He knew he had to find the mysterious beauty who had captured his heart. He declared that the glass slipper would be used to identify the woman he would marry. It would fit no one else but her. News of the prince's quest spread throughout the kingdom, and noblewomen from all corners came to the palace, hoping to be the one whose foot would fit into the glass slipper. Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters were among those who tried, doing everything they could to squeeze their feet into the delicate slipper. But it was all in vain, as their feet were too large and ungainly. One day, Prince Charming arrived at Cinderella's old home, having heard that a young maiden lived there. Cinderella's stepmother presented Anastasia as the girl who had been at the ball, hoping to secure a place in the palace for her daughter. Anastasia struggled to fit her foot into the glass slipper, and it was clear that it was not meant for her. Just as the prince was about to leave in disappointment, Cinderella's little friend, a mouse named Gus, appeared with the other glass slipper. He had found it in the palace gardens and knew it was important. Prince Charming recognized the slipper immediately and asked to see the other one. When he saw that they matched perfectly, he knew he had found his true love. Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters were shocked and crestfallen as Cinderella herself appeared, her face hidden beneath a simple cloak. Prince Charming removed the cloak, revealing her to be the mysterious beauty from the ball. Their eyes met, and they shared a smile filled with love and longing. The prince slipped the glass slipper onto Cinderella's foot, and it fit perfectly. With tears in his eyes, he declared, "You are the one I have been searching for, the one I fell in love with at the ball." Cinderella's heart swelled with joy as she realized that her dreams